Welcome to the program. I am Mary Kanu. Nigeria has recorded index cases of anthrax, a bacterial disease that affects domestic and wild animals and can infect human beings. The Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development officially confirmed the development in a statement signed by the Chief Veterinary Officer of Nigeria, Kolumba Vakuru. Vakuru said animals showing signs of a possible case of anthrax on a farm in Suleja, Niger State were reported to his office on July 14th. The Nigerian Veterinary Medical Association has urged the federal government to declare a state of emergency in the animal health sector to nip anthrax and other zoonotic diseases in the bird. Further investigation is also ongoing to trace the source of the infection and to identify the spread to other farms and humans, though human exposure has been reported. There are no reports so far of human symptoms or mortality. Meanwhile, the Agricultural and Rural Development Secretariat of the Federal Capital Territory Administration has begun a mass vaccination of cattle to curb the spread of the virus in the FCT. Nigeria is a meat-loving nation, so the question is, do we stop eating meat? Well, joining us on the program to speak more on how to curb the spread of anthrax is Dr. Emmanuel Ebroko, an immunologist and vaccinologist. Thank you very much for joining me. Currently, anthrax has been found in animals, and as a zoonotic disease, it can be transferred to humans. So what are the causes and symptoms of the disease, and how severe is it?
Okay, first, thanks for this avenue you provided so that we could educate the public to actually see the importance of this. So as regards the question, what are the means we could get this and the symptoms basically. So anthrax, as we know, is caused by bacteria, right? The Bacilli anthracis, which is a gram-positive organism, right, that could be transmitted easily, right, from animals to humans, right? So there are three simple ways it could be transmitted: from cuts, which is the continuous means of transmission. So if the fluid or the blood or body fluid from the animal, the blood and all that come in contact with a cut, maybe from the farmer or anybody handling that contaminated animal parts, or right, it could be gotten through that means, and the means that determine the symptoms we might see. So if people still consume that, which means the other means is through contaminated food, which is the gastrointestinal means of transmission, by consuming contaminated meat parts and all that. So if it's through that route, some of the symptoms we might be seeing, from nausea, vomiting, definitely there's fever, because the immune system is sensing that there's an infection and is trying to respond to that. So definitely we will see this the symptom of fever. Then also the person might experience abdominal pains, right? Those are some of the symptoms that we might see. Then when it's not the pulmonary one, which means you inhale the organism, might be the spores and all that through the airway, what we now see is that it could lead to severe complications like even pneumonia, secondary to the anthrax infection. You will see difficulties in breathing. The person might be having challenges trying to breathe. Also, fever is one of the other symptoms the person is likely to experience. There will be shortness of breath because the respiratory tract is being complicated. Then this might lead to bleeding, might lead to septic shock, because the heart is going through a whole lot trying to. So those are some of the common symptoms we could see when someone gets infected by the anthrax bacteria, right?
Now, the first case was detected in a mixed livestock farm in Niger State. We know Nigerians are known for their large consumption of meat. According to government estimates, the country consumes 360,000 tons of beef each year, accounting for half of all of West Africa. The question now is, do we stop eating meat?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. Should we stop eating meat? Should we stop having our source of animal protein? That is a really is a serious question. But this is the thing: it depends on the trust or the confidence we have in our public health system, right? If we have a very strong public health system that is already putting measures to contain, right, which means there are different means they could do that, right, in terms of ensuring food products or cattle don't leave the area which we are seeing as a crisis on at presently to other unaffected areas, and right. So if we already have these good public health measures where food items are well checked, are well screened, right, I'm not sure we should have the anthrax easily moving through contaminated food items right into public and into the mass market. People consume that. So the question is, that does not mean we need to stop eating meat, but there are certain meats like the thigh, like especially for more, which maybe for this time, people should be careful of how they consume all that. And also, it's not just that, the source where you get these items from. You should take that very important. Where are you purchasing these meat parts from? What kind of meats are you eating? The bush meat and all that. We have to be careful this period to try to minimize our consumption. Does not mean we have to eliminate it. So all that is that, yeah, anthrax is common in cattle. So when we talk about that, we talk about goat meat, we could talk about cow, we could talk about sheep, right? So we might not necessarily stop to switch to other forms of protein like chicken, turkey. We can even go to fish because you can. So we can do a substitute our source of animal protein as against things like pomode that might be at greater risks of being contaminated, right?
We do understand that anthrax infections in humans have a significant mortality rate if not recognized and treated promptly. In the case of an infection, can first aid be carried out, and how scared should we be at this point?
Okay, the thing about anthrax, since we know anthrax is a bacterial infection, yes, at the early phase, it can be treated, right? There are antibiotics that can be used that are effective. But the thing about anthrax is that it's not just the organism itself. We also have the exotoxins. So even if you get rid of the organism, the exotoxins is another is a major problem, and it depends on the concentration of that exotoxin. That's what determines whether the person who's infected is going to survive it or not, right? Let me give an instance. If someone has something like diarrhea, right, maybe secondary to food poisoning. So even if you take an antibiotics, it might kill the organism. But in diarrhea, why we say something like take a lot of fluids and pass out the stool, is so that those exotoxins can be excreted out. Because if you don't, the toxins might still cause more harm. And that's also the case of anthrax. But in terms of fear, we just need to be careful on how we communicate so that it's not just a matter of creating fear out there. We just need to enlighten people on what they need to do. But just that the challenge about Nigerians is that Nigerians are already hesitant. Let me put it that way. Post-COVID, Nigerians now don't still even believe that there was something like COVID-19, right, which disrupted a lot of public health systems. They've not still seen that. So they might think, oh, is it anthrax they want to use this time around to actually scare us or something? Or is it a political gimmick or something like that? So it would take a whole lot of communication to actually ensure people get the right message, and we are able to achieve a very positive behavioral change. But what I would say at this point is that the public health system, from the laboratories, the clinic, everybody needs to be active. They need to be prepared, right? We need to strengthen the system and give them all the necessary support they need so that if cases needs to be done, identified and properly handled, they should be handled. But when you don't have the necessary tools, and even if you have the people, I wonder how you will solve that. So as regards treatment, yes, there are effective antibiotics that can be used to treat get rid of that. Then another thing about the anthrax is how do people handle it? So even if they've seen cases, because anthrax is kind of a very let me say, if the blood from a dying animal, because yes, they might be bleeding from infected animals, right? So if that blood come in contact with the air, it forms spores, And those spores, the organism goes to the spore form, which means it's a way to try to be protective about itself. And that spore form is very resistant to heat, is very resistant to a whole lot, right? And it's still viable because when conditions are favorable, it can germinate and form the organism again, right? So those are how this organism is a very sensitive thing. And in addition to that, the spores might be odorless, colorless, and you can't even see it. So that might lead us to when we now say it can be used in cases of maybe biocrime or bioterrorism and all that. But in some, generally, they are effective antibiotics to treat, just that it's a very sensitive case. That depends on when you detect it. When you detect it, that determine the outcome of treatment and if it's going to cause a lot of damage to the human health that is infected, right?
All right, now, well, so far, there has not been any conversation about treatment. If a person has been exposed to anthrax, what is the treatment and is there a vaccine to prevent it?
So so as regards the best form, like we always say, is prevention, because you don't need to treat what you can prevent, right? And that starts from the getting the animals vaccinated, right? Thank God in Nigeria, yeah, we have the Vaccine Institute at VOM, the Veterinary Research Institutes, right? That have the capacity to manufacture animal vaccines. They manufacture animal vaccines. So with that, that means yes, there's a vaccine to help prevent anthrax, especially for animals, right? So the major ways we can do is those animals that are not yet infected on those regions, why don't there should be public health campaigns to ensure they get vaccinated, right? So yes, an effective vaccine, but who's going to fund that? And do we have the capacity to actually produce the quantity we need at this point? Because just an institute, do they have the capacity? Those are the key questions we need to look at. Yes, there's a vaccine. Yes, we have an institute that can produce this vaccine, but can they produce in the quantity we want? And who's funding that in a country that is going through a lot of economic downturn, right? So who funds that, and do they have the capacity to produce? If we can produce, yes, then the next thing is can we distribute this so that they are being used in places they have to be used, especially in the environments where we are having this major outbreak and other possible hot zones that the organism might just spread to, right? So those are some of the measures we can use to contain it. There's an effective vaccine currently, and we have an institute that can produce the vaccine. So we might not necessarily be looking out to import always. We could just get the necessary support to technology and we start producing that in mass. That's the way forward for that.
All right, now we have to go on a break now, so let's take a break. But when we return, the conversation will continue. Just stay with us. Welcome back. The announcement by the federal government about the outbreak of anthrax, a bacterial disease that affects domestic and wild animals and can infect human beings, has generated worry. And this is what we've been speaking about on this edition of the program with a medical expert. Now, Dr. Emmanuel, what categories of people are at risk of contracting anthrax and what precautions should be observed?
Okay. Yeah, so the categories of people are first, like you said at the beginning, it's a zoonotic infection, which means an infection that can be transmitted, that is usually transmitted from animals to animals and animals to humans, right? Especially animals to humans in this case. So which means what we have to look at people that handle animals. So that comes to the farmers, right? So the farmers that deal with animals, people that deal with wolves as well, sites, right? So those are the frontline people. Then people that deal with food items, right? That work in the food industry that will have to deal with food items, meats, parts, and all that. Those are the persons that would also be, because if the spore is already found in this food and they are dealing with it, they are also at risk. Why I'm saying this is that when we got the news initially that there's an outbreak in Ghana, chances are very high it would come into Nigeria. So what you need to do is to be serious with your borders, right? Right, then take animal screening very seriously. But if we've missed that phase, we are now in the next phase that is already inside. What do you need to do now? What are the possible means of transmission? The animals first. You have to look at that and those who deal with these animals. So if they can do isolation, isolate animals, isolate, create really good space. Quarantine measures have to be really done. If they are sick animals, those animals need to be separated from that. What about the waste management? Or if there's a dead animal, how would that be handled? So those are measures we need to put in place, or these persons need to invite to cut the chain of transmission, because all these organisms need a medium to be transmitted. And that medium is maybe from animal to animal. You might see mild cases of animals or humans to humans rather, which is not really common. So those are some of the things that we need to really have in place to have a successful campaign to actually eradicate the organism and put this outbreak to an end.
All right. Anthrax has been recognized and classified as bioweapon potential and has also been used for such purposes. So how much danger does this pose for Nigeria, especially since the beginning of the West Africa outbreak in Ghana in June 2023?
Okay. So yeah, thanks very much for that. That's a very interesting question, because what I'm saying is interesting is we currently in a country that we are dealing with a lot of security issues. So if we now go to the area of biosecurity, it's a very serious one. And it's serious because we have to be careful of also the amount of information we let out, because one thing is when we overdwell on something, even when people are not aware of it, they become aware and say, oh, this is what we can do. So yes, anthrax can be used for both biocrime and bioterrorism, because biocrime, yes, it affects a few number of people in a localized community. Then when it's affecting the mass, at that point is terrorism, right? And the reason, like, I think sometime in September, October in 2001, there was cases of anthrax being used as a bioweapon in the United States, and that made them put a lot of biosecurity measures in place till date. So America took, and that is very easy, because this is the thing about biothreats, is that it can just be put in, the spores can be put on a later, for example. It's invisible, it's odorless, it's colorless, right? So, and it needs just few doses to actually cause serious problem to its victims. So imagine those spores might be in an envelope and someone sends that envelope to their target, and as he opens that, he inhales it, because like I said earlier, the respiratory route is one of the means people could be infected, and he inhales it. He might not feel the impact immediately. So it might be days, weeks before he starts noticing that his health is going down, what's wrong, and all that. So yes, it's a massive problem. So that's where we need to focus on that. Do we even have all these measures in place, like our NCDC, as regard the security threats this might have? That's a very serious angle. So it's not something we should joke with. We should have measures in place to deal with this. Anthrax can be used because of how deadly it is and how resistant. Imagine the spores that can stay in the soil for like decades, like even up to 20 years, still there, right? So it's not just something you joke with, it's something that should be taken really seriously. So yeah, it can be used for as a bioweapon. So it's something we should take very seriously in how we are handling this, so that we don't lead the next era of we have to be dealing with serious bio issues, like using organisms to now start killing people, right? So that's just something. But like I said earlier, it's a very sensitive situation and should be handled seriously. Yeah.
Well, this brings me to the next question and my last regarding biosecurity, which, highlights the necessity of anthrax surveillance, prevention and control in anthrax endemic nations. What measure should be put in place?
So, like I said earlier, we should be, this is the thing we still talk of when we talk about information. Information is power, right? And like I said earlier, we should be careful of the information we give out. That's why people are talking about with artificial intelligence, for example, leads to easy access to so much information. We know that any organism in this life, or most organisms, can be bioengineered. Yes, organisms can be bioengineered with the level of recombinant DNA technology and the likes we're having. Organisms can easily be generated in the labs, right? Those are part of the thing we saw with speculations around certain recent outbreaks, right? Organism, that this organism, was it bioengineered or was it something they manufactured in the lab? So as regard anthrax, like I said earlier, is the spores. Anthrax spore can be on the soil for decades, for years, right? So what that means is if there are mediums of these spores can be gotten in large quantity, or they could be manufactured in the lab and in large quantity. That's just the major sometimes biofermenters and all that. If they can be manufactured in large quantities and these things are extracted, purified in a way they are still viable and they are well packaged. When they are well packaged, it can be right. Just draft a letter, sprinkle a lot of the spores there, seal that letter, send it to the particular victim, and when they open, we know it's transmitted via the military route, right? When they open the spores, just it's not something they can see, right? It's not something they can smell, right? So once they inhale that, it's the job has been done, and we don't want that. But like I said, we have to be careful about the information we give out there, because if we give this information, we're just striking a thought in the mind of the wrong person, and this might lead to massive problems, and we don't want that. Yeah.
All right, now, Dr. Emmanuel Ebroko, immunologist and vaccinologist, thank you very much for your time. That's our program. Thank you for staying with us. I am Mary Kanu. Bye for now.